Imagine you have enough money to buy any watch in the world. You walk into a luxury boutique and you say, "I want a Patek Philippe." The answer might be, which one? But the real question is, will they sell you one? Now imagine you walk into another store. You say, "I want a Rolex." You can probably name the model. You can probably find the price. You can probably find one somewhere. But here's the strange part. Both companies are privately controlled. Both are among the most powerful names in luxury. Both produce mechanical watches in Switzerland. And both have built businesses that most competitors can only dream about. Yet their strategies could not be more different. One built an empire through scale. The other built one through scarcity. One wants the world to recognize its crown. The other wants collectors to recognize something almost invisible. So tonight, we're going inside the battle between Rolex and Patek Philippe. Let's start with something that sounds almost impossible. Rolex is estimated to produce around 1.2 million watches a year. Patek Philippe produces roughly 75,000. That's not a small difference. That's a completely different universe. So here's the obvious question. Why wouldn't Patek simply make more watches? Think about it. If demand is enormous, why deliberately refuse to satisfy it? Because Patek Philippe may have discovered something more powerful than selling watches. Selling the feeling that you can't have one. Let's look at Rolex. Rolex's philosophy is almost industrial. Not cheap, not mass market, but incredibly controlled. Rolex has built a highly integrated manufacturing system where major components and processes are controlled internally. The goal is consistency, precision, reliability, scale. Now look at Patek Philippe. Its philosophy is completely different. The company doesn't need millions of people wearing its watches. It needs the right people wanting them. And that's the first clue to understanding this entire rivalry. Rolex wants to make the world's most recognizable luxury watch. Patek wants to make the watch the right people can't stop thinking about. Now, let's go back to the beginning. Rolex began with Hans Wilsdorf, and Wilsdorf had an obsession, making wristwatches trustworthy enough to be taken seriously. Patek Philippe is older, much older. It traces its origins all the way back to 1839. But here's where the Patek story gets fascinating. In 1932, during the Great Depression, the Stern brothers acquired Patek Philippe. And they weren't outsiders. They were already suppliers to the company. And that family never really left. Henri Stern, Philippe Stern, and today, Thierry Stern. 4 generations, 1 family, 1 company. And this is where Rolex has an equally unusual story. Rolex isn't publicly traded. There is no Rolex stock ticker. You can't buy a piece of Rolex on the stock market. And here's why. Hans Wilsdorf created a foundation in 1945. Today, the Hans Wilsdorf Foundation is the private shareholder and owner of the Rolex Group. Which means something very unusual happened. Wilsdorf effectively removed Rolex from the normal corporate game. No quarterly earnings call. No activist investor demanding more profit. No shareholder telling Rolex to sell more watches this year. Rolex can think in decades. And Patek Philippe can do the same. Because both companies are protected from something that destroys many luxury brands. The pressure to grow forever. Now look at the Rolex machine. Submariner, Daytona, GMT Master, Datejust. You don't need to be a watch collector to recognize them. And that is Rolex's superpower, recognition. A Rolex can be photographed from across a room, and someone will know what it is. Rolex doesn't just sell horology, it sells a universal language of success. A Rolex tells you something before you say a word. But Patek has a completely different advantage. Imagine making something so desirable that producing more of it could actually damage the brand. That's the Patek problem. The company has deliberately maintained relatively low production, and that scarcity has become part of the product. Consider the famous Nautilus. At various points, demand became so intense that reported waiting periods stretched into years. Think about how strange that is. You have the money, you want the watch, the company knows you want it, and still, you wait. And here's where luxury becomes psychology. If something is available everywhere, its value feels different. But if something is difficult to obtain, your brain starts assigning it more importance. That's why Patek doesn't need to scream. It doesn't need giant advertising everywhere. It doesn't need millions of customers. It needs collectors. People who know the difference between a watch that costs $30,000 and a watch that makes another collector stop talking. And this is why the secondary market became so important. A watch can leave a boutique and become an entirely different object once collectors start competing for it. So if Rolex sells more watches and generates dramatically more revenue, is Rolex the winner? On paper, absolutely. Rolex has enormous scale, massive brand recognition, global distribution, iconic models, and an estimated revenue base several times larger than Patek Philippe's. But then comes the uncomfortable question. What if being smaller is actually the strategy? Imagine two restaurants. Restaurant A serves 1 million meals a year. Restaurant B serves 70,000. Restaurant A makes far more money. But Restaurant B has people flying across the world just to get a table. Which restaurant has more power? That's the Rolex versus Patek question. Rolex wants to be the world's most powerful luxury watch brand. Patek wants to remain one of the world's most desirable watchmakers. Those sound similar. They're not. And there's another reason this story isn't finished. Thierry Stern has been president of Patek Philippe since 2009, continuing the Stern family's control of the company. His sons are already involved in the business, which means Patek isn't really thinking about next quarter. It is thinking about the next generation. Rolex operates with a similar advantage: independence. These aren't companies desperately trying to prove themselves every year. They already won. The question is, how long can they stay on top? Because the luxury watch industry is changing. Swiss watch exports have faced significant pressure. Consumers have become more selective. Secondary market prices have changed. Younger buyers are entering luxury, and the world's wealth is shifting geographically. In a market like this, the winner may not be the company that sells the most watches. It may be the company that protects desire the longest. So, Rolex or Patek Philippe? Rolex gives you recognition. Patek gives you exclusivity. Rolex gives you scale. Patek gives you scarcity. Rolex built a global icon. Patek built a collector's obsession. But here's the question I want you to answer. If someone offered you any Rolex in the world, or any Patek Philippe in the world, which one would you take? And don't answer based on the price. Answer based on something much more interesting. Which one would you still want if nobody knew you owned it? Rolex versus Patek Philippe. Who really won? If you enjoyed this story, subscribe to the Brand Rivalry, because this is only the beginning. We'll uncover the rivalries, strategies, and hidden stories behind the world's most powerful brands. Subscribe, share this with a friend, and don't miss the next one. Until then,